Also, the other day, I was listening to L.A. Marzulli. Anyway, his video came out, and he was talking to Marcia Castillo. He was talking about his upcoming uh, documentary about the Shroud. Marcia asked him a question. I won't get to what that is, but you'll see. I'll eventually get to it. I'll eventually get around to it. The first thing I thought of, wait a second. This goes back. You'll see where I'm getting. It may seem like I'm jumping completely to something different, but I'm doing it on purpose. There's this legend about this thing called in the Egyptians called it the Jed or Jed, and other names for it are the Pillar of Osiris. And the story is that Set, the evil brother of Osiris, had planned to capture Osiris in a chest because he knew that it would fit him alone. After Osiris was tricked to going in and lying down, Set quickly nailed the coffin closed, sealed it with molten lead, and threw it into the Nile, where Osiris drowned. The chest floated to the city of Byblos in Syria, where it ran aground and was later encased in a tamarisk or terebinth tree, some say oak. So King of Syria had the tree cut down and installed in his palace when he noticed its sudden appearance on the shore. The jackal-headed Anubis later helped Isis locate Osiris in the king's palace. So um, Isis, Osiris' wife, went there and picked up the pillar. So she knew that Osiris was dead, but somehow associated with the tree. And she wanted to resurrect him, or she believed that he would resurrect. So she got the pillar. But sometime between that, Set found it again, cut Osiris into little pieces and distributed them all over Egypt. And there's one lost piece, as we know. It's symbolized by the obelisk, uh, the strange artistic form of the Egyptian Djad, or Pillar of Osiris, has been interpreted in several ways. It's said to represent Osiris's spine, or the Syrian cedar tree that grew encasing his coffin with the branches removed. Another interpretation is that an image of the four freestanding pillars, each placed one behind the other, looks like a spine. The salient point, though, is the Phoenician letter Semka looks very much like the Jod, and it is the symbol for the fish. The Hebrew equivalent, the Samekh, means to support. And I talked about that in my book. So if you go to the Phoenician alphabet, you can see that indeed shows the Jod here, or the Jed,
Right.
as what it came from originally. And then you see the forms of it later on. Yeah,
Proto-Semitic.
Semitic, Proto-Semitic, Proto-Canaanite. Here it looks, it's inverted, kind of, or maybe not. It kind of looks like a thorn. Some say it looks like fish scales later on in the Phoenician. Oh, Proto-Canaanite. This is the Phoenician. It comes more of the form that is used, also called Proto-Hebrew, Samekh, or fish, or support. I was looking around for more information about this, and there's this interesting site out there. John J. Parsons. I'll put all these links on the video if I put it out here. He talks about the Samekh. He talks about um, every letter in the Hebrew alphabet,
Hmm.
but he said some things that really stuck out. So the modern Hebrew looks like a circuit, which is interesting. Cursive is just a circle. And he talks about the gematria. It's the 15th letter of the alphabet, and it has the numeric value of 60. The pictograph looks something like a shield, or the modern cursive does. And the classic Hebrew script is a circular shape with a squared left corner, like this. The root of the word Samekh means to lean upon or uphold or to support. The root is also found in the Jewish concept of Samekh, the laying of hands upon the head of a sacrificial victim in a blood ritual of the Jewish temple, which was also a means of consecrating the priesthood. Biblical references to the root occurred in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Ezekiel, and elsewhere. In ancient times, Samekh may have been represented by a shield, or it may have represented a shield. Today, the Jewish rabbinical ordination ceremony is called the Samekh. So you have the idea of the Jad first. So I was thinking, well, wait a second. That's something that is a corruption of what went on at the cross. You have this idea of somehow God being associated with a tree, but
Right.
dead and expected to resurrect. Not only that, this God somehow, after he resurrects, is this hoped for thing that somehow imparts resurrection or the possibility of resurrection for the rest of mankind if he's pursued to a certain extent. Which brings me to this thought always is, well, how could that have been even thought about so many thousands of years before Jesus was at the cross, Jesus resurrected? And I say it's an angelic inkling, it's an angelic prophecy. Somehow this idea has been put forth but not completely understood, especially by the fallen angels. And they make a distorted religion about it. So I look at this as a prophecy of the Messiah, this letter, even though the concept of what it was very, very early on, especially by the Egyptians, was um, distorted. And if you look at where the legend has that, so notice where Byblos is, and the little legend is the cask of Osiris was set adrift in the Nile. So you see here the Nile Delta, and it came
Mm-hmm.
out. Um, the legend, I think, talks about Tanis, and it went across the Mediterranean Sea up here to northern Lebanon. Actually, you can see that here. Actually, it's not really northern Lebanon, but interesting that Byblos, town of Byblos, got its name from the Greeks because of papyrus, and it had a high quality papyrus, and they used it for writing. And
Mm-hmm.
who do we know Christ as? The Word.
Yes.
Where do we get the Word? In the Bible, you know. So it's in this area. There's Sidon. It was north of that. There's a strange tale. But going on from that, so you have the ideas of laying on of hands. You have the high priest laying the sins on the scapegoat, or laying the sins on the bull before the sacrifice, or an exchange of the high priesthood itself. And he's talking about the ordination ceremony. I don't know if it's a high priest, but if you're gonna become a rabbi, I think there's a ceremony where you lay the hands on the forehead of the person that is going to be a rabbi, a teacher. Let's see, some more. Samekh is said to represent the endless and everlasting spiral of God's glory in the universe. Also, the letter for the Sukkah. And this is an interesting idea. Um, the pronunciation of Samekh, if you do that phonetically, um, you get all these instances that they're talking about here. It's like in English, it would be B-E-E, or T-E-A. There's not a lot of examples of that, but in Hebrew there are. And so anytime you look for the word Samekh, you get this idea of to lean upon, to uphold, to support, or sacrificial victims in blood ritual where the high priest would lay their hands on the sacrifice. And this is an important one. This letter Samekh represents the number 60. And some of the Jewish sages have noted that it is the same number of the letters found in the priestly blessing found in Numbers. Uh, I need to find that. Let's see if I can find that here. That's where I was. Oh, 623. The interesting thing about this is that God told Moses specifically, this is the prayer that you give to Aaron. So Aaron was the high priest. This prayer, and I looked at it, was said every morning after the morning sacrifice in the Temple of Solomon, I believe it was, of course, Herod's temple as well. But uh, interesting thing was, legend had that the priests who did this held their hands up in the form of two shins. You've seen this, the thumbs
Yes.
touching,
Yes, 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 yes. Yes,
and
mhm. Yeah, the
and
Spock
as they yeah, and as they did that, so they said this prayer in Numbers. Speak, so the Lord bless thee and keep thee, and in Hebrew, it's in the form of three words. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Thus said every day after the morning sacrifice. And as the priest said it, the people were to not look at the priest doing it. It was said that the Shekinah glory of God shone through the priest's hands at the time that he made that blessing. And the whole blessing itself has the gematria of the Semka. That's what that's what this writer is saying here. Notice that the gematria for the Semka is 120, which represents a double portion of blessing, given in both the former covenant and the new covenant of Yeshua. Also, the gematria of the Semka is represented as Yod He in the Hebrew numbering system, which, of course, starts also one of the sacred names of God. And then he talks about the miracle of Simcha. The letter Nun, which immediately precedes the letter in the alphabet, suggests someone who is bent or someone who humbles himself in brokenness and submission to the Lord God. Putting these two letters together, we have the Hebrew word Nes, which means miracle. Seems to be pointing to one person. All of this,
Mhm.
very profound ways. This is something I didn't know. There's a there's a phenomenon in written uh, in the written Torah where the scribes sometimes, and a lot of people don't have a definitive answer as to why, enlarge certain letters. And there's an interesting one here in Ecclesiastes. And I think immediately when I'm thinking about Ecclesiastes, I thought, wow, when I was younger and I read it, I was quite depressed.
Mhm.
I mean, written by Solomon, he basically is saying, oh, you know, all is vanity, all comes to nothing. Riches, youth,
Yes.
the every activity of mankind and all civilization come to nothing. And he comes to this last verse. I'm thinking each one of these verses talks about Christ. The preacher sought out to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. The words of the wise are as goads. And it's interesting that these words are included here, and as nails fastened by the masters of the assemblies, which are given from one shepherd, nails. And further by these, my son, be admonished of making many books, there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. And this is the one that has the large Samekh in it.
Yeah.
Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. And I think, again, talking about Christ, the whole duty of man to keep his is to keep God's commandments. Have we done that? Has any man kept all of God's commandments? And then it kind of hit me. What is Ecclesiastes all about? It's about Solomon, right? About this is it's like a paragraph where he's talking about Christ that resolves all this. The resolution is here. And if you go to an area where that type of phenomenon is recorded, you can see it. It's called Sefaria.org. You can see the large Samekh right here.
This resolution at the end of Ecclesiastes is why many believe or trust in Solomon's restoration before his passing. All his experience, yeah, all his experience of the world after departing from God and being blessed, his exile into debauchery and experiencing all with the ability to experience all, that he was restored at the end because of what he wrote at the end of Ecclesiastes, that he came to the conclusion because of the great wisdom he was given, that he of course concluded the importance of what he had been given to begin with, and returned to the Father. They say he couldn't have written those words had he not returned to the Father. He would not have written those words, and it would have been his end of life final statement, his deathbed speech, proclamation and speech.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Solomon, he knew about the coming Messiah, of course, but this is a resolution to it. I mean, this last bit, this paragraph, I think this whole thought is the resolution to all of the vain activities of mankind is Christ. Sort of in summation of what my interpretation is of this is it's the summation of Ecclesiastes. It's the resolution of Ecclesiastes in the word of Christ. It is Christ, and everything that's in Christ is represented here, but with that mysterious allusion to what Christ is going to be doing in the symbol of the letter itself. The letter itself has that whole meaning, going back to the very earliest representation of it. I keep saying Semka. I mean Samekh. I don't know why I'm doing that. The 15th letter is an image of the thorn and thistle growing up from the ground. This.
Mm-hmm.
Samekh is the meaning of a thorn or shield, as thorn bushes were used by shepherds to build a wall or shield to protect and enclose a flock from predators. Genesis 22:13. Or Genesis 22:13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and beheld behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his thorns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. That idea, thorns somehow associated with the Samekh. Samekh is a replacement of sin. The sound of the Samekh is the first, as you go through the Hebrew alphabet, first hissing noise. The sound of the Samekh is the sound of the serpent. And in Numbers 21:8, the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh at it, shall live. The idea that Christ, that idea, Christ, God, man on a tree, takes on sin, saving mankind, just in this one letter. The Samekh in one
It's
symbol is a prophecy of Christ's sacrifice, death, and resurrection. The Phoenician Samekh turned on its side is an image of the three crosses together upon Golgotha. You see
mm,
that?
mm,
As Yeshua received upon himself the sins of the believer, the Father's wrath came upon Yeshua instead of the believer. With Samekh, meaning to lean upon, transfer of self and make clean, the laying of hands upon the head of the sacrifice transfers the person's burden of their sin to the sacrifice, bringing death to the sacrifice and the renewed life to the person. And here's this examples of Samekh being used in that way in Leviticus. Jesus freely took the whole of mankind's sin upon himself, freeing all men who look to him. And finally, there's this guy, Rabbi Aaron Rashkin, said this: the Samekh, which is greater than the Mem, the letter before it, represents the era of the resurrection of the dead. This is the ultimate manifestation of Mashiach's coming, when all the souls of the departed will return to bodily form and reside on earth for all time. In the world to come, the ring of Samekh becomes even greater than its original function of supporting the fallen, for then it will radiate with infinite transcendent healing, which will last for eternity. The Samekh's written form has changed from the Phoenician to the modern Hebrew, now appearing as a circle. And that's all I have to say about the Samekh. But now I'm going to finally go back to the shroud. So I wanted to point this out because a lot of people don't realize what's going on here. When you're looking at the shroud, you're looking at a negative image, of course. And when you see all the images online, they're what the photographic negative is. So, and I said that right, but it's not quite right. So here's a positive image, and if it was hanging up in Turin, this is what it would look like. But it's a negative image. It was only seen in the positive aspect in the negative plate after it was first photographed. So if you're taking a picture of something, you have to realize that there's a reversal and a mirror image going on when the negative plate receives the image. So here's a good, representation of that. So a man has light bouncing off of him, and the light goes through the lens and gets focused to a point, and then it's displayed on the sensitive plate over here, and it has to be at a certain distance from this lens to be in focus or to be clear. So here's the negative image of the positive image of the negative image.
right.
But if you're observant, you'll notice you have this, I think, a water stain over here on the left,
Mm-hmm.
and it's on the right over here. You'll have the figure on the shroud's hand is his right hand is the top one, and here his left hand is the top one. So it's definitely reversed. Of course, this one would have been upside down as well, as you see here, but it's been rotated 180 degrees.
Right.
So you have them both here. And that's important. It's a very important thing, because what I'm getting to is the question that came up when I was listening to L.A. Marzulli.
One last question before I let you go. What do you think is that mark that he has here? Looks like the number 3. I've always wondered.
Well, these marks that are on the head, it wasn't a crown, it was like a helmet of thorns. And that's blood coming from the wound.
That's blood coming from the wound.
That's all that is blood coming from they didn't make a crown. It's like a helmet, and they smacked it down.
L.A. answered a question, but didn't answer a question, which sent me on this path.
Okay.
I wanted to point out that there's another form of this writing that hasn't been talked about.
Huh?
Anyway, what I wanted to point out here was I didn't talk about the language that Christ spoke when he was on earth. It's called Imperial Aramaic. And it was what Jesus spoke. Mark 15:34. That's Aramaic. What happens to be Samekh in Aramaic?
Very close.
I think it's appropriate that it's called Imperial Aramaic, Samekh. And this is a negative image. So I thought it was profound that even in the image that you'd have to get that was a negative, or in order to get the positive image, you'd have to get the negative image on a photographic plate, which would in turn put the orientation of the Samekh here in this fashion. Because if you're looking at the image in any of these other areas,
reversed and then reversed.
It's inverted. Going on though, Ellie Marzulli was talking about someone he worked with, who I think is deceased now, called Dame Isabel Piczek. And she was a physicist and an artist, and she had something that I only saw once. I think it was on a YouTube video. And unfortunately, this video is made for 3D glasses. I don't know who did that. I couldn't find anything that had better resolution, so bear with that. But she says something very interesting.
Drastically.
When you look at the image of the shroud, the two bodies next to each other, you feel that it's a flat image. But if you create, for instance, a three-dimensional object, as I did, the real body, then you realize that there is a strange dividing element, an interface, from which the image is projected up and the image is projected down. The muscles of the body are absolutely not crushed against the stone of the tomb. They are perfect. It means that the body is hovering between the two sides of the shroud. What does that mean? That there is absolutely no gravity. Other strange things you discover, that the image is absolutely undistorted. Now, if you imagine that the cloth was wrinkled, tied, wrapped around the body, and all of a sudden you see a perfect image, which is impossible unless the shroud was made absolutely taut, rigidly taut.
That's the best explanation I've ever seen of how the image is formed. I do agree that you cannot get an image like that unless you have a flat plane on either side of the body. And moreover, I have some images. She was talking about singularity. You've seen Stargate SG-1? I'm pretty sure you probably have, Chad.
Of course.
Remember the episode where they're working around a black hole to get some energy to destroy the Ori Stargate, and they're trying to communicate with the ship that's closer, near a Stargate that's near the event horizon. Well, that concept being, if you're near a more intense gravitational field, time, according to this observer, is going very slowly, and the opposite is true from here. Time, according to the person near the black hole, would look at you and see you, even if you're waiting a year for him to come back out, just in a couple seconds, just leave. You wonder, why did they just go away? Well, you've been here for 20 years. According to them, play the next video here. You'll enjoy this one.
But with the image fibrils, it's all very neat and tidy. It's very organized. And it's very clean. So the cellulose comprising the fibrils has undergone a dehydrating, oxidizing reaction, causing it to age faster than the others. These are the image fibrils. They have aged faster than all of the other fibrils on the shroud.
And I stopped a little bit sooner. He was saying radiation changed the fibrils, but they don't have any idea about how it changed the fibril. They say what's changed, but they don't know how the radiation changed the fibrils. They're saying that the image is getting less definite because as time goes on, the whole cloth ages and becomes more of a brown color, kind of catching up with the brown color on the shroud that the image is composed of. So I was thinking if you have a flat plane here, and if you have, keep that idea of Isabel Piczek, yeah, so her theory, she was talking about a singularity halfway somehow creating the image on the shroud, but the linen had to be a flat plane for it to occur. And with that idea that there's some type of, if it's a singularity, there's some type of time dilation. But also, I mean, it doesn't make any sense by singularity. There wasn't like huge gravity there all of a sudden. There wasn't a black hole in the form of a plane, whatever it was. I'm just thinking about maybe there was some type of propagation of a time distortion field. Whereas where the nose would be distant from the flat plane, that area of the propagation wave would hit the linen first and thus age it the most as it passed through, because it would be the greatest section from that halfway point to the tip of the nose as it propagated out and went through or impacted the flat plane. It would have made the image by altering the passage of time on the flat plane. Not necessarily radiation as people would think. It's a propagation of altering time